I remember learning, I was speaking up in L.A. at something, and someone said, you pass right by the house that was filmed in the opening credits of the Brady Bunch. You ought to stop and check it out. And I did. And I realized how much I liked that. It was kind of weird. I felt like Pastor Mike shouldn't like stuff like that, but I watched Brady Bunch as a kid, and big deal. And then I start going online and realizing that you can go visit these movie places, and it's kind of fun, I guess. I mean, I've never gone on a tour of them all, but all these houses and famous places, and there's something about that where your mind has been focused on some backdrop of some movie that has affected your life, and to experience that in person is kind of neat. There's an interest in that. Well, going to Israel, is 10 million times more of an effect than that, but it's the same principle, right? Here is something that you have been studying, you have been imagining, you have been picturing. You are banking your life on the life, work, ministry, death, and resurrection of Christ, and you've never seen it in person. You've never seen where it happens. Like you go and see the Father of the Bride house, or whatever it might be, and it's like none of the actors are there, but you envision all the scenes that took place there. There's no getting around the fact that when you do that with the Word of God in places that you've been reading and studying, and you're there on the Sea of Galilee, where you have pictured all the different things that have happened there, right? Jesus calling his first disciples, Jesus calming the storm, Jesus reinstating Peter in John 21 on the shores, cooking breakfast, putting them out on a rock, the charcoal fire. You can't help but just wow. I mean, you don't even need all the archaeological information that you will, be drinking out of a fire hose to ingest, but you will, that will be a life-changing experience for you. And so if God has so blessed you to be able to have the resources to do this trip, all I can tell you is this is a first-rate trip in terms of, the accommodations, the completeness of what you are investing in terms of all the tips and all the stuff. I mean, Pastor PJ is going to go into all that in detail, but I just got to tell you, if you can get between now and then everything in order to pay for this and make this happen, it'll be a great experience you'll never forget. Even today's passage, I've been there several times, and hard for me to read the sections of Scripture without wanting to comment on the experience. Like when Peter today, it said in Acts 11, and when Peter went up to Jerusalem, well, I can't help but always think of things in geography. My first introduction to this was having to take an entire course in my undergrad. I got a degree, my undergrad in Bible and theology, and we took an entire class. They made fun of it in my major. They call it historical coloring, because we had to make maps. The tests were all about making maps and identifying places and making sure we knew where Pisidian Antioch was, and could you identify whatever it might be, Mount Carmel on a map, and we're usually creating all these maps for tests and exams and quizzes, and so I've been envisioning all of these things, and I have had in my mind this sense of what they were, but it was so scant and it was so skeletal. It wasn't enriched by actually going there and listening to the bus revving up the mountains to try and chug 50 people up to Jerusalem, and realizing whatever direction you're coming from, you're burning through diesel fuel to get 50 bodies up the hill. And then to think, okay, when Peter comes from the coastal plains of Joppa and Caesarea and makes that trip that we make back and forth to the airport and to Jerusalem, it's like, of course he's going to say, and Peter went up to Jerusalem. It doesn't matter that he's going east. This is a trek. Or when you read about Jesus telling a parable about the beating of the Jewish man on the road to Jericho, And you recognize the road to Caesarea is so much different than the road to Jericho, because the road to Jericho from Jerusalem is just such a craggy, twisted, even in the bus, it's like you'll be scared if you sit near the front to watch, the bus going around these switchbacks to get down to the lowlands of the Judean desert. And to think about Jesus giving the story of, the bandits or the thieves on the road beating this guy and ripping him off on the way to Jericho, you have it in your mind forever, right? I mean, we'll go from Jerusalem, from our hotel in Jerusalem down to Qumran and the Dead Sea that day, and that's, and also just that pathway. You just think, okay, of course, if you're going to give a parable about someone getting mugged, that's the road you would do it on. Yeah, the Mediterranean Sea. At the latitude of Jerusalem is so much like Southern California, you realize why God picked it. Because the coastal town feels just like, going down to Liso Beach or Laguna Beach. Feels different than going to Laguna Beach, but the weather, and coming up to Jerusalem, the elevation of Jerusalem, it's just so much like Southern California. Then going out to the Judean desert, it's a lot like, if I said, hey, we're going to go out to Palm Desert this afternoon, drive out there, you'd expect the temperature change, you'd expect what to feel, and all of those things you feel, and then you just cannot ever envision like John the Baptist out in the desert again, out in the Judean desert, without feeling the temperature and the arid nature of the dryness of the desert. These are things that you can't really explain, and the pastor can't stop to explain and can't even fully communicate the richness of how the text is then read. As a matter of fact, you will never jump into your daily Bible reading again and not think, where did this happen? Right? Did we go there? How close did we get? If we got to Haifa and looked north, is it that direction? And if Damascus is over there and he was on the road to Damascus, all these things come to life. Even the first day, when we'll go to Joppa, Tel Aviv, and you probably won't, I don't know, if you're like me, we'll fly in and we'll get to Joppa, we'll get to Tel Aviv, and we'll have a hotel, and, a lot of times, a lot of us will just go out and grab some dinner, and you won't want to sleep because our sleep will be all off, but you'll be so excited to start the touring the next morning. You'll go to the old city and walk around the old Joppa, which they still have, and there's some neat things there. And then the next morning you get on a bus and head up to Caesarea. That'll be like, I think, even as we've laid it out, right, the second day, July the 7th. You head up there, you see the Roman aqueduct, all of that, and you'll go, okay, that's exactly what we've been studying in Acts, or did last year, it will be at that point, we've seen Cornelius' men come down to Joppa. We've seen now Peter in Joppa staying by the sea, which you'll go, oh, that's what he was looking at. This was his view. Going up to Caesarea, that 30-mile trip. I mean, if I said we're going 30 miles up the road, to Long Beach or Torrance or whatever, you'd have a sense of how far that is. And again, when you start thinking about all these things happening on foot, you just have a full appreciation. You will no longer read cities in the New Testament or the Old Testament without trying to think of what was going on there. And it is a challenge, and some of you have been there before, right? How many of you have been there before to Israel? Yeah, you know that you want to go back because there's just so many layers of information and biblical history that take place in all these spots, right? So you can think about like going to, and I think, even the first day we end up in Megiddo. You think about Megiddo, you can't help but think about, once you get informed on these things, if you don't know, but like Old Testament realities and Solomon's, outposts and what happened there in the intertestamental period, or what is prophetically predicted to happen there in the book of Revelation, all of those things, it's like you can't concentrate on all of them at one time. And I saw on here the primacy of Peter, which I don't remember what day that is. I think it's on the 8th of July. Yeah, visit the primacy of Peter, which is a weird name for that little church, by the way. And again, these are the kinds of explanations we'll have when we get there. But primacy of Peter church, the primacy of Peter, think about Peter, on this rock I'll build my church. And there is a rock in that church, by the way. And it says it in Latin in the front, the table of, I think it says the table of Christ or something like that. And you'll think, oh, that's like the Lord's Supper table. That's the table that's built, the church's little chapel is built around that rock because they are believing that that's the place where Christ laid the fish out after the charcoal fire and fed Peter in John 21. Well, so many things happen in the ministry of Christ along that shore. It's the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and yet, that one I'll probably come on scene there and speak on the restoration of Peter. It's just such a powerful passage. I can't help but find the pastoral encouragement in that passage. But, that's just one thing that happens there. And that's why some of you will want to go back. You'll drink out of the fire hose, and then you'll be like, I really want to do that again, because you want to go back to some of these sites and see it even from a different perspective, a different layer of biblical history. Because if you think about it, we're dealing with history from 1445 BC when they enter the Promised Land. You think about, Ai. I mentioned Ai and Achan this morning briefly in the third service at least. And, you think, well, where was Ai, right? No, okay, we're going to go to Jericho. I think we're going to Jericho one of these days, aren't we? Are we going to Jericho, Pastor PJ? I don't remember. Sometimes on tours we don't go, but sometimes we do. But Jericho, you think about, okay, Jericho, conquer, divide and conquer the Promised Land. Okay, well, you're thinking in the 1440s, and you then have to think through all of the successive generations of Old Testament. We go through the, that's the conquest. You can even think back before that when Abraham was a sojourner in the land that we're going to go to. So you go back to 2000 BC, and then you got to go all the way to like 95 AD. So that's so many different things that have happened, and it's all on the canvas of the place we're going to go visit. It's a lot. And we were just talking about, you guys have been there, it's just so many things. But because all of these things are the things your mind is always engaged in, and it will be every day for the rest of your Christian life, it's a well to draw from that you will never tire of. You will have images, and it's more than images. If I said, we're just going to spend the next, maybe I'm going to do my version of the historical coloring class, as they mockingly called it, and we're going to do biblical geography, and we're going to put up stuff, and we got cool things now I didn't have when I was an undergrad. We're going to have YouTube videos, and guys, you will still not have the taste of your falafel lunch in your mouth, and the smells of the old city, and the air of the Sea of Galilee, or the aridness or the heat or the smells of the site. You just can't replicate that on a YouTube video. Could we educate you without going to Israel? Sure, and you could do what I did, and you could pass tests in college on the land of the Bible. But the reason a lot of colleges have programs where you go there as a student and you study on site is because there's nothing like learning it when you're there. And the immersion programs that they have in a lot of Bible schools to send you there and study there, it's life-changing. Pastor Mark, are you in here? Did you go to IBEX? No. Okay. You know people that did. Yeah. Anybody go to IBEX that's in here? No. But those kinds of programs, it's 2 semesters, right? IBEX is 2 semesters? It's 1 semester. But still, right? That's 3 months, right? You're there living in the area. And, the education that you do there is just, you can't replicate. That's why schools are willing to invest in sending their students there to graduate them with a knowledge of biblical history. So I love it. And it's not just that. I mean, when we go to the Old City, I will point out to you, if I have a chance to do it, and we've got everybody together, it's be hard in the Old City, St. Mark's Monastery. Not in the Bible, right? But in the 1940s, right, the St. Mark's Monastery was the first place that they took the Dead Sea Scrolls and housed them there and pretended that they had them there for centuries, those Orthodox. And they came then to the Albright Institute, which is called now, ancient, Center for Oriental Studies, as they called it back then. And John Trevor, who was there doing his PhD dissertation in the 1940s on the flora and fauna of Palestinian, which is kind of a boring dissertation in my mind. But anyway, he was writing this dissertation, and he had his cameras, and he was doing this work. And here come the leaders of St. Mark's Monastery, the first place to house the scroll of Isaiah, right? After the Bedouins got it and they sold it to them, and here they bring it to John Trevor just outside. We'll show you where the Albright Institute is, and take photos of the Isaiah scroll. I don't know. Those are the kinds of things that are just, it send chills through my body. Like, that's an exciting thing, and that's 2,000 years after Christ. There's so much that has happened there, right? Even reading about, and we don't even have time to get to the layers of the 6-Day War and Israel's independence, but even trying to understand the Palestinian-Israeli conflicts, which you will get a reverberating effect of when you're there. Right? That's why when you're talking to someone, you're wondering, are you Jew, Palestinian? Those things, like, there's just so much. All I'm telling you is that you could spend months there and still not come away with the full understanding of what matters to us, not only as Christians who believe that God worked in the past on the canvas of that part of the world, but he has a plan for that part of the world. And that is not inconsequential, that the Temple Institute, building the third temple, is their plan to restore the worship of the God of the Old Testament on the Temple Mount. I mean, we've got a big shrine in the way, but to go in there, and I don't know if that's on our tour or not, probably not. Is it on the tour? Temple Institute? Well, we'll show you where it is, and we'll walk by, for instance, the big candelabra that they'll have out in the Jewish quarter of the Old City. And it's like, that is from the Temple Institute, and they're planning on restoring worship on the Temple Mount. Those are the kinds of things, like, it still matters. This canvas still matters. Unless you've become, a preterist, if you know what that means, and you've dismissed, or you're Amil, and you've dismissed the entire significance of the Jewish nation in the future, you go there from our biblical perspective, from your pastor's biblical perspective, and you're going to say, this is significant. I mean, this is going to take center stage, as though it doesn't take center stage anytime something happens. I mean, we watch what happens, right, on the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, and you saw it on the news, and the tear gas and all that took place. And, of course, it's always a spin in the liberal media about the Palestinians and the poor Palestinians. And, we want to stay out of all of that when we're there, right? But the point is, it's on the news, it will be in the news, and it's going to be a significant playing field for what unfolds. I mean, the Temple Mount, which we no longer get to go into the Dome of the Rock shrine, that, when we used to be able to go in it, I'd go in it, and you can see the rock that is exposed inside of that, where the actual Holy of Holies was. I mean, that was the center of that, of Jewish worship, where Solomon's temple was, where Herod's refurbished temple was. That is now the third most holy site in all of Islam. I mean, the conflict is palpable under the surface of all that's going on there. And again, we talk for hours about what's going on there now and what's going to happen there in the future, and yet you're just thinking, well, I just want to see where Jesus is on the Sea of Galilee. It's just, you can drink out of a fire hose. There's just so much. So you can't get it all. The good news is, when you go today, you have so many resources when you get back. Right, you buy a good atlas, you look at good websites, you have the photo albums that they have online that you can see the in-depth stuff, and maybe we go into the church of, the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and you're going to shuffle in and shuffle. We're doing that, right? Okay, good. And you'll be like, I didn't get to see everything, and even what I saw, I wasn't sure. And well, then you're going to go, and you're going to go back, and you'll be able to imbibe in all of the stuff you'll see online, and you'll go, that's it. And I did see that, and I remember that, and I remember what it smelled like there, And there's so many, the incense of the Eastern Church and the Ethiopian Coptic Church, and just there's so much. It will change your life. It'll change the way you read the Bible. You will never forget it. I hope you can afford to do it, right? If you can't, that's okay. We can save for the next trip. We're hoping nothing derails this. I do plan on going. I had several people ask me even when I came in, am I going? I'm planning on going. Asha's glad that I'm going. So that's my plan, right? Lord willing, who knows if I'll even be alive by then, but I plan to go. I plan to lead it, and depending on how many people go, we'll determine kind of how that all works out. But from our perspective right now, and PJ may amend this statement, but we can take as many of you as you want to go. So we will adjust. The Templeton group is used to big groups. So if all of you can go and then 10 of your friends can go, I think we can accomplish it and get it done. And my goal is to go to different places. I can think of that first full day when on July the 7th, we go to Caesarea. We'll be in the amphitheater, the Roman amphitheater. And after preaching on the book of Acts, who knows where we'll be at that point, but there's so many things that happen right there. And says, we've already seen, you will walk into the town, the old city, and you will look at it and go, I wonder where Cornelius' house was. Had to be there within that area. Right? These finds of the amphitheater and the fortress and the harbor, right, that they have uncovered. All of that was what was there when Cornelius and Peter had that significant. How significant was that, right? The inclusion is just huge. And it'll be great. And I envision that day, the amphitheater will hold, thousands. And we will get a corner of it with all of you. We'll probably have some cool shirts that make us look like tourists, and we'll be matching, and you'll wash it in the sink at night, and we'll take group pictures in the amphitheater that first day. It will be a trip to be remembered, and I hope you can go. I hope you can go with us. It will be fantastic. So, I told them I wasn't going to take any questions, but the details of the trip, Pastor PJ is next. So he's coming with all that. But there's anything you want to ask me as the pastor, kind of who will be teaching from spot to spot? Is there any question you have for me that I can answer real quick? Asha, I knew you'd have a question for me. What is your question?
Can we see some videos and some information before going? So at least...
Yeah, we will, I'm sure, figure that out. Matter of fact, the pastors, we've talked a lot about this trip because of COVID and all that. But it seems like it's been a pretty one-dimensional discussion where we finally were like, okay, we're able to pull the trigger on it all. But in the planning and the training leading up to it, in the past years, I've done things where we do some training and involve some videos and some teaching. And it's not required, but if you want to get more out of the trip, the prep ahead of time is important. So we will discuss that. And Pastor PJ is quarterbacking the administration of this trip. So a lot will depend on what he would prefer to do, but as a group, we will decide how we participate in that. And of course, if I can, I'm happy to do that. And the training for this class will take place after Congress votes to add an 8th day to the week. Then then I'll teach it on that day. Thank you, daughter. My daughter laughed at that joke. You've heard me probably say that before. Not quite in that way, though. I just think a good round number like 10 would be good for the days of the week. I'm not questioning God in any of that, but that'd give us 3 extra days to do stuff. Any other questions besides expanding the work week? Anything that relates to me? Not me. It's not open field on what shoe size do you wear, but as it relates to the trip. Anything that burning questions? Yes, I'm going to go. Yes, I plan to teach there. That all you wanted to know? That's it. Pastor PJ, you got a question? Yes.
2 things. What was your favorite part? And secondly, what has caused them to close the film the seat, the locker rooms,
Islam, Jewish relations, and I'd have to get to the specific time when they closed it. We can still go up to it. We can still go on the Temple Mount. Unless something breaks out, we can go up there. You just can't go in it anymore, and I don't know what the precise trigger of that was. Some of the things have closed. And the reason that we go to certain places in some trips and others we don't, in part because we don't have endless amounts of time, we have to make decisions. But there were times where it was more than when the hostilities between Palestinians and Jews were heightened, where it wasn't smart for me to take hundreds of people to like Bethlehem. The last time I went to Bethlehem with a tour group, which I think PJ took people last time, but I wasn't on that trip. It was Yasser Arafat's birthday, and they were all shooting their machine guns into the air while we were getting off the bus. I don't know. I just thought, probably shouldn't come back here next time. Because I'm assuming gravity works the same way there as it does here. And I remember asking the tour guide, I'm supposed to be like the pastor of the trip. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, it's Yasser Arafat's birthday. Could we have come on a different day? So sometimes we haven't done those. Now, this tour company is good to get us into places like Jericho. For a while, we didn't go to some places in the West Bank. But so, yeah, that's in this case, I think we're pretty much most of it is open to us except for a few of the sites. And I don't know technically what the reason was that they closed the mosque. It's not a mosque, it's a shrine. There is a mosque in the corner. We don't go in that either. But my favorite part is hard. I know Pastor PJ, when he said, here's what I'd like you to do today, he said that too. And I don't know what that would be, other than to say one of the frustrating things that you will probably experience is that, Christ is the most important person in all of history, obviously. And for those of us that know the significance of Jesus the Messiah, as Peter said in our passage today, the Lord Jesus Christ, that obviously when you find a spot that you know is the spot of something that took place significantly, which all started, it started from the very beginning, but there was a renewed interest in what went on there in Constantine's day in the 4th century. And so his mother went out and started on finance tours to locate places. And so when that happened and Rome legalized Christianity, they built churches everywhere. And of course, they went through a series of historical machinations, the Ottomans and the modern era. There's just a million different striations of that. So you've got churches upon churches upon churches, and there are places that are like, I wish this wasn't here. It'd be great for it to be in its, unmolested form. Even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you've probably seen pictures, but I mean, if this is really where Christ died, and it's one of the 2 sites that we will look at and visit that's potential, you're like, it'd be great if we didn't have what we have there. A quadra-defined, segmented set of churches functioning over this one spot where Christ perhaps died, and I do think Constantine's mother had identified that spot, and those spots had been identified, but churches were built on top of them. So that is a frustration. So I would say as a category, some of my favorite places are places that have not had churches built on them. And one place that hard to build a church on is the Sea of Galilee, because when you're out there on a boat or even just on the shore, you'll get up in the morning because our sleep will be off a little bit, and we were going to meet on the bus or whatever at 8 o'clock after breakfast or whatever it is, 9 o'clock. You might take a jog or make a walk, and you're walking along the sea at sunrise on the Sea of Galilee. You'll think, how many times did Christ and his apostles wake up and see this very scene? Okay, maybe not across the way in those hotels over there, but this scene right here, right? That is my favorite, to see things like that. Or even the hillsides, like there's this place where they believe that Christ probably preached his Sermon on the Mount. And that's a great side. There's a church there that's not far from the shore, but there's a nice couple big hillsides, and they're still there, and it's beautiful. And it's like, okay, this is Jesus preaching on the hillside. If not here, it was over there. If it's not there, it was over here. That's great, because the scene is still intact. Even in the primacy of Peter Church, which I was just talking about, near Magdala, that little church is just a little church, a little chapel where they built it on top of that rock. But then there's, a couple hundred yards between the church and the shoreline, and you can walk out there and get hundreds of people. And I don't know if that church will let us, but our tour guides will be all about that. I can preach out there and talk, and this is the scene, right? I can stand with my heels in the Sea of Galilee, and you can stand, and we can picture all of this the way it was the morning that Peter was out there preaching. So even though there's a church there, it doesn't affect that space. Now, when you go to Jerusalem, and we build up to it. What day do we go to Jerusalem? We go to Jerusalem on the 11th? No, we get there on the 10th. And when we drive into Jerusalem, it will be palpable, the excitement of going to the old city if you've never been. And even though a lot of it is not the way that it was in the 1st century, and even the walls are the Turkish walls, they're not the walls that were there, Herod's walls. I mean, they match at a certain point in the corner of the Temple Mount, but that's exciting. I mean, I love the old city of Jerusalem. I love the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem, because you can walk through that, and we won't have a lot of downtime, but the downtime we have, take a walk through like the old city, but walk through the Jewish side. You'll see kids there that are coming home from school, and you have this sense of, this is such a cool thing, right? And to pop into a bookstore, or, to grab lunch, or to the little cafe, or grab coffee if you like that. And that's super cool. And love the old city, and love the unmolested sites. That's not a good word. I love the sites that don't have churches built on them. But even in the churches, there's great history. I mean, in America, you take a colonial tour in New England, and you see buildings that are 200 years old, and you're like, whoa. You see buildings there that are really old, right? You start 1,000 years, it's like, it's not that old. There's old things to be seen. And when you see the corner of Herod's foundational stones, right, and even the marks in Robinson's Arch, where the stones were thrown down and made an indent in the flooring, right, the stones on the ground. You're like, these marks were left in 70 A.D. And that's just crazy, right? 2,000 years ago, that happened. Those are the kinds of things that you will never forget, and it's really cool. I love the Temple Mount because we know where the Temple Mount is. It's obvious, and those are some of my favorite places. Yeah. I don't like the politics. I don't obviously like the tension between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But I do think you're going to love this trip. So Pastor PJ is going to come now and give you details. And I do hope you can join us. And let's pray that we can all get there and that nothing disrupts this plan. And I'm looking forward to leading the tour and teaching you in the land of the Bible.
All right. Thanks, Pastor Mike. So now down to some of the brass tacks, some of the questions that you have. And let me, I'm not going to start with COVID because I want to start it on a positive note. If you'll grab your brochures there, some of the information we're going to cover is contained in there, but hopefully you're all aware of the dates of the trip. Maybe not, but we're looking at July 5th through the 15th. Of next summer, 2022. And so it seems like a long way off, but it's going to be here sooner than we realize maybe or understand. The cost of the trip is outlined on the front of the brochure there for you as far as the total is concerned. It's about $5,000. We knock off $5, or they do, because it's like gas being $2.99. Or, when was the last time it was that? It's like gas being $4.99 a gallon, right? It's like, it's not $5. So you feel better about pulling in at $4.99 a gallon. So this is considered this $4.99 a trip, but $4,995 for the trip. By the way, that price is not set by us, just to clarify. That's set by our tour group. We contract with Templeton Tours, and Templeton does a great job. They are very seasoned with this and experienced with this trip. They partner with another agency called Voice of Faith Tours, and that's who our tour guides are going to come out of and come from there while we're in the Holy Land. And so that's part of what this is all going towards. It's, as you see on the front there, the airfare included, as well as taxes, deluxe hotel accommodations. They are really nice hotels. We're not going to put you up in hostels where you're wondering if you're going to survive the night. These are nice places that you'll be able to stay there. 3 meals daily, breakfast, lunch, and dinner are included. So anything outside of that, sometimes we'll go into areas where you'll have an opportunity to go to a local market or someplace that you'll be able to pull out some of your shekels, because we have to convert our currency there, and be able to buy some food on the side. But your main meals are going to be covered in the cost of the trip. Gratuities for the entire trip, tips and everything else for drivers, everything is all wrapped into this price. Entrance fees. Personal listening device, because as we go along, there's going to be crowds, although not as many as the last time. We went during the spring last time, and it was beautiful. In fact, cold sometimes. It was 32 degrees on the Temple Mount when we went there last time, which was not enjoyable, but it was pretty awesome to be on the Temple Mount. It's going to be super hot this time. So there'll be less people there, though. But nonetheless, there's going to be a lot of people around, and so these listening devices allow you to listen to Pastor Mike or to our guides as they're walking through, and you can hear and understand what's going on. Deluxe air-conditioned coach. Like I said, it's going to be the summer in Israel, so you're going to be thankful for the air-conditioned side of the bus there. But let's get into the cost breakdown a little bit here. So again, there's the trip, 9 nights, the 6th through the 14th, as far as overnights there. The first overnight is on the plane. And that cost inclusion there broken down a little bit more in detail on the front of your guide there, but $4,995. Here's the registration information, and we'll walk through these points here. So again, registration is currently open through Templeton Tours. So Templeton Tours is the company that we contract with. The registration link is up and active if you want to register even today. If you say, I'm all in, I'm ready to go, or maybe you're already there, or hopefully you will be by the end of our time, and you want to register, you can do that right now, saying we're good to go for the trip. The deposit is $250 to hold your spot. Now, that's for each person. So if you have a family like mine of 7, we're not all going. Because we want to send kids to college eventually. But it's $250 per person who's attending that trip. So just bear that in mind when you go to make the deposit. And then later on, by March 17th, there's $750 additional per person that needs to be paid. And then the remaining balance, which is $3,995, is due by May 6th. And those, again, are Templeton's dates. Those are what they put in place as their target dates so that they can know for sure that they need to hold this many spots for airfare and hotels and everything else, buses, so forth and so on. So those dates are not our dates. They're not really movable for us. So make a note of those dates, write them down or highlight them, and just so that you know when payments are due by, because those are important dates. Again, not ours to change or manipulate, but those are all from Templeton on their side. Some of you may be wondering, well, what if I sign up, but I am not entirely sure that I'm going to go? There is a cancellation fee no matter when you cancel. So if you cancel prior to 91 days before the trip, 91, I don't know why, just that's what they said. You get 125 of your deposit back of that 250, but not the full 250 back. If you cancel between 91 and 60 days, you lose your deposit, essentially. The charge is going to be $250. If you cancel anytime under 60 days, there's no refund issued at all. So under 60 days, you're kind of on the hook for the whole caboodle, which is Yiddish, I think. So that's what we're looking for as far as cost. Questions as far as the cost is concerned? Yes? The website, which website is that? Well, but not with us. So the website's wrong. With us? What do they list it at? Really? We are breaking news right now. Okay, well, we will get in contact with them because we got all this information straight from them. So, hey, if we can get you $500 off, we will get you $500 off. Will you, not that I mistrust that won't be there, but will you screenshot that and email it to me at pj@compasschurch.org? Thank you. That would be great news. $500 off. Look at that. You showed up to the meeting, you saved $500. Potentially, right? All right, yeah. When we contacted them, they said $49.95. That's all the stuff that we've seen, but if it's going to be $500 cheaper, we will not argue with them on that. Yeah. Yes. Correct. Yeah. Totally possible. In fact, our last time we had people flying in from different areas. Some people were already in Europe and they were making a trip out of the whole thing. And so they were flying and meeting us different places. But yeah, contacting Templeton, and we'll get you the contact information for them so that you can coordinate all of that. Yeah. That's a question I don't know the answer to. Kelly, will you make a note of that so we can follow up with Jeff Templeton there? We'll find out. I'm not positive, but we'll find out the answer and then let you all know on that. Yeah. Yes, I believe it's one flat rate across the board. I don't believe there's variation on that. Yeah. Yeah, and bringing kids on the trip obviously is more than welcome. There are a couple days where there's a lot of walking. Masada and Getty kind of hiking back into there. There's a lot of walking involved in that, and so just be aware of that. It's not an overly physically taxing trip, but it's not just riding trams everywhere you go either. So, yeah, just keep that in mind as you're making plans as a family. How hot are we talking? Hotter than here by a lot. Have you been to Arizona during the summer? So we're talking like 105, 110 probably in some of the peak of the heat there. So the buses are air conditioned, and there's water provided on the buses, and our tour guides know how important it is to stay hydrated, so they're always encouraging people to stay hydrated.
I didn't ask you correctly. How long during that, 3-digit,
Yes.
we will be outside air conditioning rooms?
It
Roughly.
It varies. The question was, how long will we be outside the bus? It varies. It depends on the day. There's some days where we're traveling and we're in the bus for 20 minutes between sites, and we're out and we're walking around those sites for 2 or 3 hours. There's other days that we're going from Galilee down to Judea, and that's going to take a longer drive in the bus, and you're going to be on the bus longer. So it does vary, but yeah, it is hot for sure on that. So let me get to what everybody wants to know, and that's this. Are there COVID restrictions? The answer right now is yes, and I didn't list them all out because there's, number one, there's a lot, and number two, we're praying that it's going to change. And so, not tongue-in-cheek at all, I would encourage you to join us in praying that these restrictions would change and change quickly. I know this informs a lot of decisions for us on this. Right now, the question is, are vaccines required? Yes. And if it's a multiple dose vaccine, they require both doses no later than 5 months previous to the trip. So you have to have your second dose within 5 months of the trip. So if we're going in July, somebody that's better with math than me can chime in. What is that, February or March? So if you've already been vaccinated, then your vaccine's out of date for them. I don't know if the booster will suffice on that. I don't know what with the Johnson & Johnson single dose, what that looks like. But again, be praying. These are some of the things to pray for. You also right now have to have a negative PCR test prior to leaving the United States. You have to have your vaccine passport. Then when you land in Israel, you have to have another negative PCR test, and you have to have a serological test done before they will let you into the country. So I understand that is daunting, and that sounds like a massive hurdle right now, but that's why we need to be praying that these things change before we go there. And so add that to your daily prayer list, put that up at the top of the list, and be praying that these things change, because we would like to see it pulled back. One of the advantages that we have going for us is Israel has two primary moneymakers. Number one is agriculture, and number two is, guess what? Tourism, right. So if their tourist industry hurts and suffers as a result of this, I'm hopeful that we'll see some of these restrictions relaxed. But that's what it is right now. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, we've got an interest list going. So if you haven't signed up for the interest list, go ahead and sign up for the interest list. It's not the same thing as putting a deposit down. The interest list is just for us in-house. If you are interested in going, then I would say put the deposit down through Templeton. So that's kind of how we'll differentiate those things. If you are interested in going, sign up here through Compass. And there's no deposit for that, just to be on the interest list. But then, and we'll keep you up to date with everything going on through that. But then if you want to go through Templeton and you're ready to sign on the dotted line, you can put your deposit down through them. Does that make sense? Right. 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 There's not at this point, but we'll monitor that. And as soon as those restrictions do list, we'll let everybody on that interest list know what's going on. Yes. I believe it's included. I don't think it's separate and above the cost. No, I believe it's included in. But Kelly, will you mark down that question so we can follow up with Jeff on that? Yeah, the question was the cost of the tests, the PCR test, the serological test, the second PCR test. Do we pay out of pocket for those, or is that included in the cost of the travel? My assumption with everything else with Templeton is that it will be wrapped into the cost of the travel. There's from Israel's perspective, it's a quarantine and a rejection of admittance into the country. Right. I don't know that. Let's find that out too, Kelly. What happens if anybody is there and tests positive? The hard thing is, I don't know, because Israel's pretty buttoned down on this. I don't know that they'll let you out of the airport with a positive test. So you may be on a return flight sooner than even spending the night. But we'll find out what happens on that. If you land there and you test positive, what happens? I knew this would be the most question-driven section of this presentation, and I was so looking forward to it, too. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that that's necessarily aimed at individuals as much as it is us as a church. In other words, Templeton's telling us as a church, hey, we're not covering if something happens to your group, you're not insured by us, is what that's saying. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. So just to give you guys an idea, when we were there the last time, there was conflict and there were rockets being fired from Hezbollah to Israel, and we were on a bus, and I looked at our guide and I said, do we need to not be here? And he looked at me and goes, this is life here. This is what happens here. So I knew as long as I watched him, as long as he didn't panic, I was good to go. So I just kind of watched his heart rate on his Apple Watch, and if it went up, then I was out. I was going, okay, we're taking cover at the closest bunker. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We would you're paired up with a roommate. So when you register, you can request a roommate. If you're going as a married couple, obviously that's taken care of and you're done. Otherwise, if there are individuals going, we will pair them up as individuals with another traveler that's going from our church. Yeah, Asha.
Actually speaking, this whole thing could be just, we are talking, it could be all cleared up, COVID situation.
It could be all cleared up, and that's what we're praying for. Amen to that. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and the tourist agency is really good on this. They're in the midst of this right now. They're on the ground with trying to figure out trips going right now. So that's the good news, is we're not on the front edge of all this COVID restriction mumbo jumbo that's going on. They're interacting with all this, and we get to benefit from everybody else being the guinea pigs of this by the time that we end up flying. So. But yeah, if you are on the interest list is more than just for this meeting. We will keep you up to date and informed with regular emails about what's going on and what the restrictions are and so forth and so on there.
Do you have a sign-up sheet? I can just sign up that I have interest to. That will be so easy.
Yes. Kelly, will you make sure we get Asha signed up for our interest list? Thank you. Yeah. Right. Right. That may limit who's allowed to go on the trip. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. There are age restrictions on who can get the vaccine, who can get the booster shot, so forth and so on. So because of that, Israel may look at that and say, well, if you're not eligible for the vaccine, you're not eligible for entrance into the country. Yeah, the third booster. So I know firsthand of somebody who is getting ready to go to Israel. They got their shots prior to 5 months, and they went back and got a second shot. Like they just got a second COVID vaccine. Like not even a booster. No, they went and did the vaccine again. This is what I heard from them. Yes. So I don't know. I don't know how all of this works. I don't claim to be a doctor, at least not with the medicines. So queen of science, theology, that's where I'm at, right? Everybody else can have that. Yeah. So, yes. 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 I would at this point, yeah. Yes. Yeah, the question was, if you've already had the vaccines, you're eligible for a booster, should you wait to get the booster until you're closer to 5 months out? Yes, I would. I would wait on that. Yeah, we're into the realm of me giving you guys medical advice. And again, I'm not qualified. Let me just give that disclaimer. I'm not qualified to give you any medical advice whatsoever. only spiritual medical advice. That's all I've got for you. Yeah, I know the vaccines and the COVID, there's a lot of questions on this, and hopefully they'll get more resolved as we go along. Right. Right. So the question was about contact tracing. Is everybody out if one person tests positive? Yeah, we'll find out more on that as well. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'd be everybody's favorite if you tested positive and it was like, hey, guess what? You guys made it to Israel, but it's like going to, everybody's like, I've been to Dallas, I've been to the airport. So you've been to Israel, you were in the airport, and now you're not. Now you're home.
But that could be God's way of keeping us in Israel so we can see more sights and really get ready.
If we have to quarantine in Israel, yes, that could be God's way of keeping us in Israel for a little bit longer. All right, so here's the deal. Let me just tell you, summary, 30,000-foot summary is, yes, there are COVID restrictions, and no, you don't like them, and I don't either. But right now, we're praying that these restrictions change between now and the time that we leave, okay? So seriously, add that to your prayer list. We will be monitoring it closely. We'll find out some of the answers to these questions from Templeton and get those answers out to you as well. So, all right, let's talk about something more exciting, and that's our itinerary. So the first couple days are travel days. You're going to leave from LAX because it's everybody's favorite airport. It's not. It's where we have to fly out of to get cheaper tickets. The flight is a long time. It's long enough for you to get a horrible night's sleep on a plane. Yeah. I don't know exactly how many hours, but it's more than 3. Yeah, it's a long ways. So we leave from LAX on July 5th. We get there on July 6th, and we'll try to time that as closely as possible so that we're there towards the evening so that you don't have to stay awake for too much longer while you're there, and you can go to bed and wake up ready to go for the next day of traveling. Because if you fly into Israel and you get there, they're, I think, 11 hours different than us. If you get there early in the morning and you have to stay up all day before you get to actually go to bed, it's not fun. So we want you to enjoy your first day of touring. So we're going to get to Joppa towards the evening. You'll be able to walk around and explore Old Town Joppa there. And then the next day is day number 1, which is Caesarea, Mount Carmel. So Elijah and the prophets of Baal. In fact, we'll go up to the location that they believe that all took place. You'll be able to see the brook down at the bottom of the hill where he took all the prophets and made them go away afterwards. Megiddo we'll go to, if you wonder what Megiddo is. Armageddon, the plain of Megiddo, the plain of Armageddon there where the final battle will be. You'll look out over that plain and think about the fact that the blood is going to flow to a horse's bridle. And it'll be amazing as you just look out there and consider that. Nazareth, which is Jesus' early hometown. Mount Precipice is there where they took Jesus to the edge of the mountain to throw him off, and he passed through their midst. So you'll get to see that area, or at least where it's purported to be. Cana, which is not an area that we went to on the last trip that I was on, but this is the site of Jesus' first miracle, turning water to wine. And then Tiberias. Now, Tiberias is the name of the region around the Sea of Galilee there. So that's where we're going to end our first day there in Galilee, next to the Sea of Galilee. But Pastor Mike referenced the amphitheater, and there it is behind me. And this here is in Caesarea by the sea. And this is the amphitheater one of the locations where Paul made one of his defenses. And so you'll also get to see a prison cell where we know the very prison cell where Paul was imprisoned. So we'll get to see some pretty amazing stuff there. There's I think a hippodrome there. You'll get to see one of Herod's palaces and a swimming pool that he had that was fed by the sea there. Amazing sights that you'll be able to see during that time. Day 2 is going to be Sea of Galilee. So we're going to go out on, they call them the Jesus boats. They fly an American flag and sing the national anthem for you while you go out on the boat, because the Israeli people love the United States. Or at least when we were there, Trump was president, and they really loved us at that point. So you'll take a boat ride on the Jesus boat. You'll go out there. You'll have some worship out on the Sea of Galilee. And like Pastor Mike was saying, that's super cool because this is where Jesus was, right? And when you're out on the water, you're looking at the location and going, okay, he was here. Just a really cool experience. Hopefully there won't be any storms. They do watch that because none of us can say peace be still and have the waves and wind stop. Mount of Beatitudes, we'll go there. Again, the purported location of where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. And then we'll go to Capernaum as well, which is known as the town of Jesus. And in Capernaum, you have the home of Peter's mother-in-law, or Peter's house there, which you'll be able to see. You'll have a first century synagogue that was there that Jesus would have been at and taught at. And you also have the road right next to that synagogue where Jesus called a guy named Matthew, who was at the time a tax collector, to come and be one of his disciples. So you'll get to see all of that right there in Capernaum, which is a pretty amazing experience. Here's the Sea of Galilee. By the way, I don't know what you picture, but it is beautiful. I mean, we live out here and we see some pretty phenomenal sights, but the Sea of Galilee has a beauty about it that's just incredible. And the hotel that we stay at is right there on the water, so you will have that view greeting you in the morning. It's awesome. This is actually the Jesus boat is what they call this one. So you're going to ride on Jesus boats, not this one. The ones we ride on are way sturdier than this. But this is a boat from the first century that they dug up recently. You'll be able to walk in and see it in the room. It's not covered. I mean, you can't reach out and touch it, but you could if you wanted to and get arrested. And you could also stay in Israel longer that way. But let's not. But awesome experience to be able to see this boat and go, okay, this was like the boats that they were on there. Day 3, sightseeing, we go up to Tel Dan. Dan is one of the coolest areas that I remember seeing there. It's where the headwaters of the Jordan River are. So that's a pretty neat experience. And then they also have a place where Jeroboam, the evil king, set up a secondary altar up in Dan. And they've got a mock-up of this altar up there that you walk up and you see where his fraudulent temple stood and where this altar is, and you get a sense for the size and grandeur of it, as it was supposed to be an exact replica of the one down in Jerusalem. So pretty awesome experience there. You also get to see some neat sights around Dan, the border there of Israel and Lebanon. We'll go to Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi, another exciting place to be and to see. It's different than Caesarea by the sea. Caesarea Philippi is a different location. It's where Jesus took his disciples, where Jesus asked the question, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Messiah." And when Jesus said, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it," we'll talk about what that looks like. Mount Hermon, possible site of the Transfiguration. You'll be able to at least see that, and also the Golan Heights there. By the way, the big yawning hole there that's washed out on the screen, that's the gates of hell, and so we'll talk about that more when we get to Caesarea Philippi. Day 4, Bet Shan. Saul and Jonathan are hung on the wall at Bet Shan. And if you want to wear yourself out and run up there, you can actually get all the way up. You can talk to Mike Shemazian, if any of you guys know Mike, and Joey Sather. They ran all the way up to the wall in Bet Shan, and you can see the very wall where they hung the bodies of Saul and Jonathan. Bethabara is the traditional location for Jesus' baptism with the Jordan River. We'll go to Jericho there as long as the political, military, cultural environment allows us to. Last time we were able to. It just depends on what's going on. But if you get to Jericho, it's pretty awesome. There's a tower that's right there that they're excavating that dates to 3000 BC. And so again, 3000 BC. Yeah, it's amazing. You look for the walls and they're not there. Why? Because Joshua fit the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. And then what was the curse? If anyone rebuilds. And so the walls aren't there. They can dig for them all they want. They're not going to find the original walls of Jericho. Then we'll go into Jerusalem. Amazing experience. We'll go to the Israeli Museum where you will see this. This is a mock-up scale model of Jerusalem during the time of Christ. So pretty awesome just to see that, get a picture for it before we begin traveling around the city. Day 5, Western Wall Tunnel, the Wailing Wall. We'll go to Pilate's Palace, the Jewish Quarter, the Mount of Olives, the Upper Room, and then the Southern Wall excavations, or the Southern Steps. And those are steps that we know for sure that Jesus, that Paul, that the disciples walked up on their way into the temple. So it's cool to see those steps right there and be able to stand right there with them. This is a view of Jerusalem from Mount of Olives looking in towards the Temple Mount. The golden dome on there is the Dome of the Rock, and that is also where the temple stood and where the Holy of Holies was. It's, if you see in the foreground, it looks like there's a lot of tombs there and graves. It's because there are. It's a high honor for the Jewish people to be buried on the Mount of Olives, and they face all of the graves towards the Temple Mount because they believe in the resurrection, and they believe that in the resurrection they're going to raise and then walk into the Temple Mount with the glorious Messiah. And so that is why they are buried there in the foreground on the Mount of Olives. Day 6, Temple Mount. Church of St. Anne, which was a Crusader church. Then the Pool of Bethesda, the Shepherd's Field, the Threshing Floor of Boaz. And then in Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity with the door that you have to stoop through to get in so that you are bowing before entering into such a holy place. Cool experience. There's a shot of the Temple Mount from our last trip. There's the Dome of the Rock right in front of us. And that was 32 degrees and overcast. It won't be that way when we're there. Day 7, Masada. Site of the fortress there during the Maccabean revolt. You'll learn about the history there and why that's so significant to the people of Israel. En-Gedi, which is where David fled and hid in the cave. You remember when Saul came in to relieve himself and David cut off a corner of his robe? We don't know which cave it is, but we know where the springs of En-Gedi are, and there's a pretty good chance that he was right back nestled in where this waterfall is cascading behind me in the image there. And so there's a good chance that that's where David was when he was hiding from Saul. And that image isn't there. It's next. So hold on a second. And then Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. We'll go there. You'll be able to see the caves in the side of the cliff. And they'll be able to point them out and say, this was where these scrolls were found, these scrolls were found, these scrolls were found. And that is a barren wasteland, by the way. So that is going to be a day of heat, but also a day of information. There's the springs of En-Gedi right there. And that's right near the Dead Sea, right near Qumran. And so you can see why David would have fled to this particular region with the oasis that it is in the middle of the desert. Then day 8, Gethsemane, Pool of Siloam, Caiaphas' house, where Peter's denials took place. In fact, there's a statue of a rooster sitting outside of Caiaphas' house. Calvary, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then the Garden Tomb. And so we will visit all of that on day 8. This is something that I didn't expect when I went there. You'll notice, maybe you can make it out, the word above the door there. Can anybody read that? Gethsemane. Yeah, this is actually an entrance, and the walls were constructed. This isn't what it looked like when Christ was there, but this is an entrance to a cave that is preserved. And this was a cave that used to be a press where they would press the olives there on the Mount of Olives, which is where Gethsemane was. And this is actually the cave where Jesus and his disciples went and gathered on that evening before Judas came and betrayed him. So that's a pretty amazing experience. You're not allowed to take any photographs inside, but you can walk inside this cave and know that Jesus and his 12 were right here on that very night when Judas betrayed him. In fact, there's a church nearby here that we'll also go in that has the stone that they report or that they suggest is the stone upon which Jesus fell and prayed when he was praying, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. And some of that stuff we say, well, how do they know that? And that's a good question. And some of it we don't know for certain. And yet some of it you think about, okay, the significance of the life of Christ was known to his followers. In fact, it was known to the immediate context of the disciples right after his resurrection and his ascension. Knowing that, it's likely that in an oral culture especially, that they would have passed down from generation to generation to generation, hey, this is where it was. This is what happened. This is where we were. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it makes sense that we can point to a cave like the cave in Gethsemane and say, yeah, that's where Jesus and his disciples were. Because why? Well, the disciples kept that place in view in the importance of it as they continued on. As the gospel writers recorded what happened, they were able to say it happened right here. So Pastor Mike mentioned the idea of driving around and seeing the movie stars' homes. Yeah, other people have said it's like reading the Bible in color, which I always used to roll my eyes about until I went. And now I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It's true. Or if people that are saying you can't read the book before you watch the movie. Because if you read the book before you watch the movie, when you read the book after having watched the movie, you're going to read Elijah Wood as Frodo throughout the entirety of The Lord of the Rings, when Tolkien didn't have that in mind at all, right? Well, when we go to Israel and we bring back these images, now you can bring these images back and read the Bible with these images in mind and know that you are not reading Elijah Wood into Tolkien, but you're reading biblical sites into the Bible, which is just a really cool experience. And then our final return home day, it's like when you fly back here from Texas, you gain a couple hours, which is great. We won't go over, well, it'll feel like overnight. It's the same amount of time, longer than 3 hours, but you'll get back on the same day, which is great. Whew. Okay. Questions on itinerary? Questions on any of it? Yeah, Tim. Yes. Yeah. So City of David and Hezekiah's Tunnel. City of David is the older part of Jerusalem. Hezekiah's Tunnel is where you get to wade through water, which when it's 32 degrees out during the springtime, you don't want to do. But when it's 105 degrees, you're probably going to want to go through Hezekiah's Tunnel. So, yeah, we'll go through there. You'll wear some swim trunks through there and some water socks and cool off as you go through that stretch there. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. See, I knew COVID was going to draw more questions than anything else. Yes. In some locations, yes, there are. Thank you for asking that. Some locations, yes, there are. There is a dress code. For instance, when Pastor Mike was talking about the church, the Primacy of Peter Church, there is a dress code there, wherein if you are wearing shorts, there's no entrance into that particular location. Some women will bring shawls and wrap those around their waist when they go into any of the locations wherein if they're wearing shorts during the trip because it is so hot, they'll have a shawl with them or something like that they can wrap around to cover up their legs, and then the location will accept that, and you can go in that situation. So yeah, dress code, and we'll get all of that information to you as the trip gets closer, so you will know exactly what to pack, what to expect, what to be concerned about, what not to be concerned about. Yes. They're commercial. Yeah, no, it's not charter. That'd be awesome. If anybody knows anybody with some private jets that they want to charter some flights for us on, that would be great. No, but they're name brands. So I think last year or 2 years ago, I think we flew Delta. I think some fly Lufthansa. I think they use American. They're really looking for affordability for us. So you won't fly Spirit Airlines, I promise you that. But you may fly one of the other name brand airlines there, yeah. And even like somebody asked about other flights, I think there's a way to get different accommodations. Like if you want to fly in a different class on the plane, you can negotiate that with Templeton as well. So, yes. I don't. Can we find that out, Kelly, whether the earpieces, the listening devices work with hearing aids? I'm sure they do, just because they do this so much. Yeah. I mean, they're running these trips all the time, so they've got to have something that does accommodate for that. Yeah. In the back. Ooh, can you change the language on the listening devices? I don't know. I didn't try to do that because I wouldn't have understood anything, but it's possible. It's possible. No, so on the tour buses, it's fun. You get to know your guides a little bit, but the trip we took last time, the guide was talking to the driver, and the driver was Palestinian, so they were talking back and forth in Arabic. Well, somebody from our church went on the trip who knew Arabic, and they were laughing, and our guide stopped and looked back at them, and they were like, yeah, we understand everything that you're talking about. So I don't know what they were talking about, but they did, so. This is the only one, Asha. This is the only meeting we're ever going to have over this. No, we will. Yeah, we'll have other meetings to be sure. As details come in, and again, we'll keep you updated on what's going on with the political scene, the health scene, the COVID scene, everything else like that. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes. We are contract. Yes, I believe so. Saliba and Majd should both be back with us. So they are two of the guys from Voice of Faith that we've used. And so I'm not saying they're in the Israeli mafia, but if it turned out that they were, I wouldn't be shocked, because these guys get in places that is just amazing. And you just don't ask questions. You just go, let's go. Great. This sounds good. No, but speaking of that, and thanks for that reminder, Voice of Faith Tours is the organization that we're using. Like Pastor Mike said, we're going to get some more training materials in your hands. But in the meantime, if you want to go to YouTube and search Voice of Faith Tours on YouTube, their channel has a lot of videos that they did during the COVID shutdown where, again, they got access places where normal people can't get access to. So they went to a lot of the sites that we're going to be going to, and they shot footage right there from the sites. So, for instance, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which when we go there is going to be crowded. There's going to be a lot of people in there. Saliba walks through that church by himself in a 3-part video and shows you all of the different locations and their significance. So Voice of Faith Tours would be a great place to stop, and then we will get you more information as well as we meet as pastors and get that information put together. I don't think so. I think that's more, we've contracted with them right now for up to 400 spots. So, and we may open this up to Focal Point. And so at this point in time, that's 8 buses, 400 spots would be. So that's a lot of people going. So right now, it's not necessarily that you have to get it signed up by this point in time. However, if we do open it up to Focal Point, that's outside of our church, there's going to be an increased urgency, but we'll let you guys all know before we do that. We'll make sure everybody's aware so that we give our people, priority shot on making sure that you've got your spots before we would open it up. All right. Well, thank you for being here. And yeah. Seriously, pray against this COVID vaccine requirements and all of those things. Pray that all of that gets smoothed over so that we can all go and experience Israel in a phenomenal way. Let me close us in prayer, and then we'll be done. God, we do pray and do ask that you would smooth the way for us to be able to go. And we thank you that you are bigger than all of these things and sovereign over it all. And we ask that you would lift some of these restrictions and some of these requirements so that we could go without a fear of wounding our conscience or anything else, but that we would be able to just go and participate fully in this trip. For some people, once in a lifetime trip to go and experience the Holy Land like this. God, we want to be there, and we look forward to that. And even reminded, God, that this is the same place where your Son is going to return. After we are with him, he's going to return, it says, and put his feet on the Mount of Olives there. And we're going to be able to go on this trip and, Lord willing, stand right there on the Mount of Olives and look at the city as he's going to descend and then enter in triumphantly. God, we look forward to this trip being a reality for us so that we can learn so much more and appreciate your word so much more. We just pray that you would make it that. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.